You're going to let people in. Okay, right. Well, welcome everybody. No doubt other people will join us in a moment. And I can see people arriving in the waiting room, in fact, even as I speak. So great to have you with us. Welcome to this event run by the Prime Working Group on Careers and Sustainability. We're going to introduce our guest speaker in a moment, who, of course, is really who you've come to hear from, not from me. So I'm Jonathan Lowe, and I'm one of the conveners of the Prime Sustainability Careers and Sustainability Group. And what we always do at the beginning of our sessions, and I apologize if you've seen and heard this before, but we always do just introduce Prime and also the working group, in case we know there are always some new members of the audience who would benefit from that context setting before we go any further with our guest speaker for today. So, yeah, we are the Prime Principles for Responsible Management Education, cover all of those areas. You'll be very pleased to know I'm not going to read through them, but they cover those areas that you might expect about the purpose of management education, the values we bring to our teaching, our research, our partnering with organizations, civil society and business, the practice that we do in our own organizations, in other words, for example, our own estates policy as universities, and our commitment to sharing information on good practice and obviously learning from failure as well. So those are some of the 7 principles. And if we summarize what Prime is about, it probably helps to think of in these 3 terms: advancing sustainable development, which is obviously we are a United Nations initiative, and therefore you would expect us to have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, at the heart of what we do. Developing responsible decision makers now and in the future, and transforming the nature of management education itself, which, as many of you will know, has received considerable critique over the years for the ways in which it has the capacity and indeed has some history in maintaining the status quo and not addressing issues of sustainability, for example. It is just worth a little reminder that the Prime Initiative is part of the United Nations Global Compact, which is the United Nations outreach into the world of business. And we sort of organizationally, we sit under their umbrella, and we do a lot of things together, as some of the people in the room certainly will have been part of those collaborative events between us and initiatives between us and the United Nations Global Compact. I always have this slide up at this point in any presentation, because it answers the question, well, why does this matter? Why does it matter what we do as the principles of responsible management education in our influence throughout our membership? Well, something like 1 in 3, 30% of the world's tertiary education students study business, management, economics, and law. And that means something like 70 million graduates per year. So our capacity for influence is substantial. And a lot of those people are clearly going to go on into leading positions in the world of work, wherever that might be: public sector, private sector, big and small organizations. And so therefore our capacity and the potential of our influence is really what motivates us in this whole area of sustainability and responsibility. If you're not familiar with Prime, we're a global network of schools covering something like 3 million students, but in about 90 countries, and we're somewhere between 800 and 900 signatory members at the moment. We work through a lot of global working groups as well as chapters. So we are part here, this initiative is part of the chapter UK and Ireland. And this is where we come to the Careers and Sustainability Working Group, which has been going for about 2 years now. Karen and I, together with some other people within the Prime network, came together and realized there were a lot of people working in the area of employability, graduate outcomes, sustainability, interested in jobs of the future. And we thought there was a need to draw people together. The network indeed has developed into a position of being about 120 people at the moment. Some questions we asked ourselves at the outset, which have remained very relevant over these 2 years. And I've highlighted 3 of them in particular because I think they are particularly relevant to today's conversation. So we've been posing these questions and seeking to address them through our webinar program and through our other initiatives. And so the technologies in which our students need to become proficient in order to be fit for sustainability jobs of the future, we think is a very important question. How do business schools best engage with business sectors and industries to understand the impact of sustainability on the jobs of the future? And how do developments such as these challenge traditional models of graduate employability? And I know that one way or the other, we're going to be touching on those and indeed some of our other questions in the presentation today. It is just worth saying also that we have a number of active live projects, one of which is a nationwide study into the supply of and demand for placements, internships, and graduate roles, that involve sustainability. We're going to be reporting, and that you can see all of our project collaborators there, including the UN Global Compact that I was talking about before, but 7 other universities. We were reporting on the summer in that. We have a second project, which Mohammed Sayoudi and others, perhaps there are others in the room that I can't see, are working on in relation to subject benchmark statements and how we can influence subject benchmark statements, both postgraduate and undergraduate in the future. And all I need to do then is to say, well, thank you for joining this event, because I'm going to hand over to my colleague Karen in a moment to introduce our guest speaker. But if you want to contact us, these are the ways, and we will put these into the chat box in a moment as well. So, Karen, your introduction to Shaun, and then we'll go to our main event.
Thank you. A great pleasure to be welcoming Shaun today. He spoke some months ago to students on this topic, so I know that it's packed full of very practical advice that we will all find very interesting. It would be great for people to put into the chat whether you're a student, educator, a professional, because that will be interesting for Shaun to know and to lead on to questions later. Shaun comes with great passion and expertise, over 20 years of experience in ESG and sustainability, and I believe something for everyone here, because expertise in sustainable finance, climate change, and over 90 ESG assurance projects. So plenty for us to be learning from you today in terms of sustainability skills and AI. Over to you, Shaun.
Thank you for, can you stop sharing, and then I can share my screen. Okay, just bear with us one moment, everybody, while we just line that up. Okay. We're going to put it. Okay. All right. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Nothing's yet moving.
Okay. If I flip now, how about that?
No, nothing's.
Okay. It worked in the.
It worked in our trial run, yeah.
So
was ever thus.
If not, I can obviously. Oh, they're coming now.
It's okay. Just
there we go. You can see it now.
Digital fingers. Yeah, perfect. I think it's been 5 years since the pandemic, and I think yeah, you've got your set of rules now of when things aren't working, and it's just kind of work your way through it, and you'll solve the problem. So really pleased to meet everybody, or speak to everybody today on a Friday lunchtime. I think today I'm going to spend about half an hour running through the kind of key topics on the agenda. And I think ESG and sustainability is very topical at the moment, because since I last gave this presentation, obviously we've now had the kind of Trump administration come in. We're starting to see a lot of kind of discussions around environmental social governance, particularly around DE&I space. And I would imagine there's going to be further pushback on the wider kind of ESG agenda over the coming months. And what we're really seeing is that influence and impact now also coming into Europe, as Europe responds to that, and are also now looking at cutting back kind of ESG kind of regulation. So this presentation is really going to be kind of focusing on environmental social governance and sustainability. So we're going to wrap it up under one. So I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. I'm going to talk a little bit about the market, what roles are available, and the kind of project examples. I'm going to talk a little bit around some of the required skills, generic skills, which we look for during kind of recruitment phases when we're bringing through the next generation of professionals. Also very pertinent is the emergence of artificial intelligence in ESG, and I'm going to look at that in two lenses. One, how it's helping us do our day job, but two, how people are using AI to look at businesses. I'll then kind of wrap up on what the recruitment process looks like, and essentially how ESG is now relevant to kind of broader roles within business. So we'll wrap up with questions. Don't be shy at the end. I'm happy to answer anything and try and provide insights. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, other than I've kind of outlined a bit of a kind of broadish definition of what environmental social governance is. And I think it's worth highlighting at this point, ESG is very much, or its origins are very much from the investors looking at businesses to understand their risks and opportunities, looking at E, S, and G. And that was probably around about 15 years ago, I believe, when that was really, when I first kind of heard the term. At that moment, I was very much in corporate sustainability and focused on that side of ESG. So what we've really seen is that term really snowball and actually find its way in all types of aspects of the kind of sustainability landscape. However, it's absolutely critical that when we talk about ES and G, that isn't mistaken for sustainability. What you see is a number of firms are really highly rated in ESG, but maybe their businesses themselves are not sustainable. And again, that's because you're looking at things through different lenses. Now, where I kind of ended up and why I'm here, and I'll tell you why I'm working for a global law firm in a moment, because I have no kind of law background. But essentially, it all stemmed from doing an undergraduate in geology and earth science, and then doing a master's in environmental management, and it actually kind of fell into the sector, as it were. Same as what you lot are doing. You're applying for jobs. You're seeing where you can get a foot in the door. And at the time, I was very lucky that I got a job at Oxfordshire County Council in their Minerals and Waste Policy Department. At that time, it was my geology background which got me that role, not my kind of wider interest in sustainability. But I think at that point, it was a really good way just to get some experience and understand the kind of inner workings of a local council, but also understand the policy landscape a little bit more. I was then able to use that as a platform and move into consultancy, where I've spent the last 20 or so years of my career working for some of the world's largest technical consultancies. And that was and the reason why I've spent 20 years in that is because the role of sustainability in ESG has changed significantly throughout that lifetime. And one of the key things I'm going to be talking about today is being adaptable in your careers. Because ultimately, I started off as a policy guy. Then I started looking at emission trading schemes when I moved into consultancy and climate change, and then adapted into kind of corporate disclosures and understanding that, undertaking non-financial assurance, coming back into kind of human rights, and then back finally into the environmental and sustainable finance space. So when I look back at my career, there hasn't been a clear trajectory of where I'm going, other than I've stayed within the kind of sustainability and ESG sector. But I've had to very much adapt to where the market and where the market opportunities are. Now that's very, kind of consultant-led kind of perception. I'm going to talk a little bit about all the different roles in this area in a moment. But I think the most important thing is I didn't, and I still don't have a grand plan on where I'm going. I'm comfortable with that. I don't get anxious about that. I do want to make sure that I'm continuing to learn and develop. But ultimately, as long as I'm doing interesting and impactful work, I feel kind of very invigorated in the space which we're doing. There is a tension between the commercial aspects and actually what I perceive to be the right way forward. So an awful lot of my time and my job is getting buy-in, is convincing people, is getting building coalitions around my views to enable that change. And that's one skill which we're going to talk about a little bit later, because when you go into organizations, either internally or as an advisor, and as what we're seeing in the market at the moment, not everybody agrees with the direction of travel. So when we look at the kind of ESG and sustainability landscape, what we're really seeing is it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this year plays out. But we are seeing high demand and growth for all types of roles in sustainability and ESG. There is an awful lot of diverse opportunities. I very much focus on the kind of corporate disclosure space, which is essentially, businesses making external claims in this area. But that's just one aspect. You can work for governments, NGOs, pressure groups. There is, you also got subject matters like environmental, social, governance, and focusing on those areas. For instance, I'm consider myself reasonably strong in the climate change space and certainly understanding greenhouse gas emissions. But my weaker areas in, say, supply chain. Yeah, I think you need to have a broad understanding across ESG, but do have a little bit of kind of specialism in an area which you're really, really interested in. That kind of leads into those kind of specialized skill requirements. I think there is a real tricky balance between broad and understanding everything, but also getting narrow and focused. And it really does depend on what people are looking for at that moment. So we know climate change is obviously critical at the moment. So the market tends to be looking for a lot of kind of technical focused individuals to come in and support that journey. So what you'll actually see in the job adverts at the moment, they're very focused, very like we want you to understand greenhouse gas accounting before coming to us. We need to understand climate scenarios and climate risk, and I think that's a big step change from maybe 5 or maybe 8 years ago, where it was much more kind of generic skill sets which the market was looking for. In a positive note is, there are competitive salaries in this space. Before it was always voluntary and there's a bit of an add-on. But now, because of the kind of regulatory requirements coming into force globally, but also because of the, investor and consumer requirements, and a lack of talent in the marketplace, you've seen those salaries really accelerate and start becoming much more in line with peers in other industries for the seniority. I've also kind of touched on role diversity. There's also the diversity of kind of working as an advisor like I am, but also working in-house. So there are kind of different avenues and different opportunities for both approaches. So when we're looking at the market and we're looking at what those job adverts are, we're looking what's kind of being recruited at the moment. I've kind of just given you a bit of a snapshot there of what you're likely to see in the marketplace. Obviously, advisory consultant, you standard kind of big four will be hiring in that space. The technical consultancies, we're seeing the management consultancies also now stepping into that area. So that tends to be quite a broad and open range of job opportunity there. What you're also seeing from the finance industry is kind of ESG analysts, a large demand for those who can take and interpret ESG data and apply it to a investor perspective. You're looking at internal sustainability managers and directors who are actually managing the risks and opportunities of a business's impact. So understanding exactly what the business itself, how it's impacting its environment, how it's looking after its staff. But you also have kind of corporate social responsibility managers, and they're the ones who are looking a little bit more externally. They're the ones who are focused on actually, what is our kind of pro bono work? What's our volunteer work? Who are we partnering with? And that is still very much alive and kicking. On a little bit more of a narrow, you do have specialists within kind of ethics and compliance, energy managers, sustainability engineers. So again, you do have these kind of broad strategic roles, but then you also really narrow down to these kind of specialist technical roles. And again, that's one attraction which has certainly kept me and myself interested in the sustainability and ESG space, is that ability to go from maybe super technical to strategic, and strategic back to super technical. So again, I think it's worth keeping that in mind when you're looking at the marketplace. Where do you see yourself? Do you see as more of a strategy, or do you want to kind of specialize in a certain core topic? I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this slide, but it's really just to show you the growth of what we're seeing, certainly from the consultancy market. We are seeing that increase in size in 5 to 8% every year. We're seeing significant growth in that, particularly in kind of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Lesser extent in the US, and I think that's going to kind of continue that trend going into this year. That's also reflected very much in the kind of UK dynamic, which is growing. I mean, just looking at LinkedIn this morning, I saw about 3 or 4 new job adverts just pop out for head of sustainability roles for UK-based companies. So what we're really starting to see is that traction also in the UK market. And what the real core skill sets people are looking for at the moment is understanding the kind of regulatory compliance and reporting, understanding climate change and understand climate change initiatives, understanding supply chain from a kind of sustainability perspective, sustainability software and AI, which I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive in a couple of slides time, and ESG audit or non-financial assurance. Again, a lot of this is all driven by the regulation which has come in over the last 5 years. A lot of it in the UK and Europe, all associated with the EU Green Deal, which was announced back in 2020, 2021. As I mentioned right at the beginning, we are starting to see some rollback of those regulations as we kind of move into the kind of Trump era. But nevertheless, I think there's still a strong demand for these skills, not just because there's a regulatory demand, even if it does diminish, but because firms are aware of this and are needing to be credible in this space and they want to manage their risks. This does attract responsible investment, even though we are seeing some of the banks backtrack, certainly on a lot of their climate change investment plans. There is still a huge market for investors who are looking for that kind of ESG or sustainable investment moving forward. I think, fundamentally, the ESG kind of consultant market, is planning to grow, and it will continue to grow as sustainability becomes less niche and becomes much more core to business models. That leads me into exactly kind of what do we do on a day-to-day basis. And this is just a snapshot of kind of projects which I've been involved in the last kind of 6 to 8 months. So what you can see, there's quite a lot of variation. You're not just doing one project. Again, one of the reasons why I've kind of stayed in consultancy my entire career is because quite often I've got 4 or 5 projects on the go, and they tend to be very different. So you're never doing one thing for a long time. Again, I'm quite comfortable working in that environment. Some people prefer a little bit more, longer term projects with a clear kind of, a scope to start and finish, and they know what they're going to be doing for the next few years. But for me, what I find most exciting about in this space is all the different kind of aspects of work which I get involved in. So, for instance, I was doing some ESG due diligence. I was supporting large pharmaceutical on ESG reporting and responding to the regulations. I've been helping some consumer goods, particularly feeding into the US market around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to kind of change the dynamic on that. Obviously, we've done some training. Double materiality assessments is a big thing for any consultant at the moment, because that's part of the European regulation on kind of corporate disclosures. So what you can see there is a real type of varied kind of aspect. Again, quite generalist rather than specific. What I don't have listed on here is I also did a 3 or 4 week project on science-based target initiative, and that required a little bit more my accounting skills and deep dive into kind of energy management reporting and disclosures. So I think one of the core things, and one of the things that excites me about the consultancy space, is that ability to do quite a broad, I guess, set of projects, which really feeds me into, what are the required skills in this space? If you're internal, external, if you're going to work for an NGO, pressure group, or a government, there is some real core skills which everybody tends to be looking for when they're kind of recruiting. Firstly and foremost, don't underestimate the need for some base knowledge. Okay, people are really looking for, or certainly what we do when we hire in is a clear understanding of the various frameworks in the market. So it's understanding, what the regulatory landscape looks like with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, understanding what kind of voluntary reporting regimes there are, like the Global Reporting Initiative, understanding what kind of financial driven disclosures look like associated with SASB, for instance. So what we're really looking for is, we don't need you to know all the acronyms or understand the plotted history of the 20 years of development and GRI. But what we do need to see from candidates is that they've done a little bit of work, they understand the terminology, and they know where to go to get that information. So it is a core part of recruitment. It's just knowing to understand. You need to demonstrate and understand the landscape in which you're applying. ESG is absolutely critical for kind of transferable skills. As you said, a lot of we're competing for budgets with in firms, and you've also got the procurement guys going, hey, we want more money because we need to do this, and then you're competing with HR as well, who, hey, we want to develop our HR processes and policies, we need money. And then you've got obviously everybody asking for bigger, better bonuses. So you're constantly always having to justify and argue for your budget. So strong communication and kind of interpersonal skills are absolutely key. That analytical thinking and problem solving, you are always going to come across problems. Nothing is smooth. One of the reasons why consultancies exist is because they're very good at problem solving, but also working in firms, nothing is a smooth pass. So you've got to be able to think on your feet about problems and finding solutions to those problems, even if they're not convenient. Project management and people skills and organizational skills, absolutely key. Again, you're managing finance and money. So this is an absolute key skill that we're looking out for. And finally, people skills. I think everyone kind of forgets this. They're like, oh, if I do all this and I tick all these boxes and I've got the education background and I've got all of the knowledge. But if they're not showing people skills, if they're not showing empathy, if they're not being able to read a room, you certainly straight away start having a few doubts of, are they going to be able to come in and kind of deal? Because ultimately in sustainability and ESG, it's still very much a people business. And I spend most of my time talking to people, trying to help them understand their problems and solutions, but also receiving feedback, sometimes critical, sometimes positive. But having to adapt and kind of manage in that environment is absolutely key. I don't know many sustainability people who end up just sitting locked in a room just doing technical work all day. It very much is a people area. And I think really just kind of drumming down on that, when we're looking at personal characteristics, we're looking at the likes of kind of integrity, curiosity, resilience, collaboration, because those are the ones which probably get tested the most in our sector. The commitment to ethical practices, because you will be pressured, not in a mean, horrible way, but maybe we can make this statement, and you're like, well, strictly speaking, we can't because that's not true. And then you'll have a lot of people saying, it doesn't really matter. We just need to get out there and make a public statement on something. So you're constantly having to kind of stand up and show integrity by being clear what people should or shouldn't be doing. Certainly when communicating in the ESG space, greenwashing is a core term which everyone is absolutely paranoid about. So having kind of real integrity there to be able to say to people of influence, no, you can't do that, is absolutely critical. Curiosity is absolutely essential because, as I said, you've constantly got to be learning. You've got to stay on. It's a fast moving landscape, so you've constantly got to be reading around the subject matter. Either in the tubes in the morning or over your lunch times, just flicking through kind of some thought pieces, and really just trying to stay on or not too far behind the curve on where the sentiment's going and what direction. So you've got to constantly be, kind of engaged in it and wanting to know and wanting to continually learn and understand what's happening in the marketplace. The most common question I tend to get is, "Oh, how do we stack up against our peers?" Or "What's the market doing?" Because quite often what you'll find is some will want to be leaders in this space, but most want to be in the leading pack, if not outright. So people are constantly trying to benchmark themselves with a wider market. One thing, and something which we're going to definitely learn, is a resilience and not giving up, continuing to go, being able to handle those setbacks, taking them in your stride, and continuing to move forward. And I think that's one of the strongest kind of skill sets I certainly would look for when hiring in. Even as an advisory, working in law firm and advisory, there are constant setbacks. People don't always, even if you've got your argument perfectly articulated and you're like, "How can anyone disagree with me?" You'll find quite a lot of people will actually say, "No, do you know what? We're going to do this instead." So, there is this constant kind of rejection, which you need to kind of be able to handle and be understanding and understand their position of why they're doing it. But that real resilience to keep going is absolutely crucial. And as I mentioned earlier, that kind of people skills, that collaboration rather, is absolutely key. Just yesterday we were working, trying to problem solve as a small team. I think about 3 or 4 of us, we're trying to kind of solve this problem for a client, and we got ourselves into a meeting room for probably around about 2.5 hours, trying to work through what a suitable solution would be for one of our clients. And that came from us working as a team, understanding different perspectives. There was a lot of disagreement on how to move forward, certainly when we're talking about some of the kind of ethical stuff. So there is some you've got to be absolutely key on working effectively with others and who will have different views with you. So absolutely being understanding and empathetic is absolutely key. And this really leads me into kind of the changing dynamic and the emergence of artificial intelligence and ESG. Basically, I've kind of split the slide into two. I'm not going to kind of read out every word, but essentially on the left-hand slide, you've got where AI is helping us kind of analyze and manage ESG, environmental, social, and governance data. So what we're seeing is that kind of outside in, I guess, where AI is helping firms manage measure and manage the environmental impact, the social impact, and the kind of governance impact of their organization. And then on the right-hand side, what we're seeing, and this is really an interesting space where people are using AI to look at firms. So how are they judging firms? How are they rating firms? So what we're seeing AI really get into, investment analysis, sustainability scoring and rating, under sentiment analysis, using AI for regulatory compliance. So what you're really starting to see is when people are looking at investments, certainly from an ESG lens, they're leaning a lot on AI. Now, I think when we last did a review, which was probably about 3 or 4 months ago, we found nearly over 200 different kind of existing large or startup firms kind of all operating in this space, all using or utilizing AI, and really trying to plug their wares. I've interviewed an awful lot of them as part of research, also engaged a number of them in partnerships. And I think what we're really starting to understand is, yes, they are going to be a huge assistance. They are really going to help us move forward. But the real challenge, and why I think people like me, like you, are still going to be needed in the future, is how you apply that knowledge, which is absolutely crucial. You see certainly the AI is enabling us to collect a vast amount of knowledge and summarizing and kind of providing that in a short summary, for instance. But how you take that and apply it seems to be where that kind of intersection between AI and people are still needed. So what you will have to do, and as I am and my team, we're doing our own AI training and staying on top of the current trends. We're experimenting with different tools to help us. But ultimately, it's still really taking all that and then applying it in a practical way where we can kind of still add value. What I would say is we are getting much deeper insights. Deeper insights does lead to better decision making. And also fundamentally, again, coming from a law firm, ensuring or certainly helping us meet compliance requirements. So what we're really seeing is that and certainly when we're recruiting in, we do have those conversations of, what's your experience with AI? What have you experimented with? What tools do you currently use? Because what the next generation of consultants are going to do, they're going to have to be fluent in this space. Now, this is a little bit of a deep dive where we have been utilizing a partner, an AI partner, specifically in the climate change space. And I just wanted to kind of, highlight that, yes, there are a lot of positives. We're seeing a lot of effort, a lot of work around refinement of climate science. We're seeing improved forecasting, and on a bit of a more technical level, we're seeing the optimization of renewable energy. And what we're seeing is AI tools come in and will support that. But it's not always positive, shall we say. There are negatives in using AI, and these are the ones which you need to be aware of. We can't avoid them, but they do need to be appropriately managed. And one is the environmental cost. We know that the AI, obviously, through data centers are using an awful amount of electricity. So where does that generate electricity come from? How is it managed? Are the data centers being efficient? And as we see the growth, the complexity, and the use of the models, this energy usage is simply going to go up and up and up and up. This could lead to inequality in renewable power access. At the moment, there is a finite amount of renewable electricity. What we're seeing and what we've kind of been supporting with is large firms, buying that on bulk, which could lead to a bit of a shortage in market, which hopefully drive more investment in renewables. But what you are seeing is a lot of these large kind of AI firms now really kind of impacting the energy market space through their acquisition of kind of green electricity and energy. I think also, which you guys are going to be absolutely aware of, is the kind of ethical and social concerns around AI. Are they reinforcing inequalities? Are they kind of disadvantaging vulnerable communities in policy decisions? Because ultimately, they have inherent bias. I think as long as we're aware of that, and we're taking that into consideration, I think we've got to recognize it, but also understand how to kind of mitigate those biases. So those are the kind of really just an interesting kind of case study of a project which we've been working on around where it has helped us, but also what some of those kind of concerns which we discover kind of some of the concerns me and my team raised when we were going through it, having those kind of interesting debates. I think that now leads me onto my final couple of slides, and that's really around about the kind of recruitment process. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping everything up. You've got your skill sets, you know what you're doing, you've read around, you know your frameworks, you know what your job you're applying for, you've done your homework, you've kind of clarified what your kind of I guess kind of skills are regards to kind of project management, people management, enthusiasm, that type of stuff. You've got to come in with some kind of AI knowledge and background now to kind of reassure us older generation that you guys know what you're doing. So you've got all that. What does that actually mean? And I think first and foremost, when we're kind of going through a recruitment process, most of the time, all the hard work is done before that job advert is even out. So as with a lot of corporations, there is an absolute lengthy process to get to the point of hiring somebody in. So when you go into these processes, you've got to remember it might be new for you and you're like, oh, applying for this job, but probably that person has been fighting internally to get the budget. They've reworked the job description for about 20 different times. They've had to get stakeholder buy-in for where they're going and what they're doing. So it's probably been on their mind for quite a few months. So for them, it's a massive decision on who they're hiring in, and it's been a lengthy one. So it's absolutely critical that you're aware of that, I think, going into the process, that there's already been a lot of thought and kind of behind the scenes discussion around what that role looks like, what the type of candidate is, what type of fit it is, to ensure that they make the right decision. So, if you are, apply, people like your CV. Again, focus very much on how that CV applies to the job. Make sure it's a tailored application. I've seen so many kind of generic applications, it drives you crazy. So please do focus on tailoring your application. You will find that much more successful. Certainly in some of the jobs, AI are being used, where they scan the CVs for keywords and phrases to match them against a job description. So if you're not doing that, before your CV even gets seen by a human, it will potentially be cut. So you've really got to do your work of, right, there's the job description. How does my CV relate to that job description? I think one of the foremost before going into that meeting is also kind of networking. Make sure that you're connecting with professionals, gain insights, understand those opportunities. You do that through kind of obviously through the university network, through your friends network. Look for I would guess kind of social clubs interested in sustainability and ESG. All that adds to the knowledge. So when you go into these interviews, you can name drop if you need to, but you've got insights from different people's perspectives. And then very finally, you've got your latest trends. Foremost, and kind of you're always making sure that people are aware of what's going on, making sure that they do know what happened last week and the week before. So it's always worth before any interview to make sure that you're on top of those kind of latest trends, because they more than likely will come up in the interview, not because they want to know that you understand, but and understand the nuances around those trends, but that you're keeping yourself up to date and abreast of those changes, and therefore demonstrating an interest. I think, kind of first and foremost, what we tend to do, or what I tend to do, and where I've had most success is actually hiring on personality. It's really understanding what your story is, why do you stand out, and ultimately, why should I invest my time in you? Because ultimately, you join my team, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with you, I'm going to be sharing my knowledge with you. So what I want to make sure is that time isn't wasted, that time isn't not going to be effective. So when you hire people and you're also looking, am I going to be able to work with that person for the next kind of year or two? Are they going to appreciate my investment? So you've really got to be clear on what your story is. Why are you sitting in that seat? And make it clear and relatable. And I think that's probably the one area where I see really good candidates. And when I say, so why are you here? And they haven't really got their story lined up of why they're interviewing. And interviewing is a game. Ultimately, you're asking questions, you're trying to guess what I want to hear, so you're replaying that. And so what I'm trying to do is get under that skin a little bit more and understand your motivation, because ultimately the more motivated you are, the more likely you're going to hang around, and more kind of comes to why I'm going to be investing in you. This is my final slide, and we're going to open it up to any other questions. And it's really just to talk about, how ESG does have broader relevance, and what we're seeing it really feed into kind of various roles from finance, marketing, as companies do prioritize sustainability. I've seen many ESG and sustainability professionals end up going in-house and then move from, say, a core sustainability into maybe marketing and communications, or moved into more of an executive leadership role outside of ESG. Because ultimately, when as an ESG, you're really developing those skills, as we said, of kind of people, leadership, engagement, building coalitions. I think, but of course I'm a little bit biased on this, but yeah, you do have enhanced employability. There's absolutely huge huge opportunity for kind of personal growth. I am constantly learning. As I said right at the beginning, I started off in policy and then moved into climate change and then non-financial disclosures, and then back into advisory and corporate disclosures, and then human rights. Now I'm learning, much more deeply around about supply chains. So, my career is constantly evolving and developing. And ultimately, I'm coming at it from a very biased perspective, but networking is really, really critical. It's really important. But in ESG and sustainability, that networking is something we shouldn't be kind of dismissed. It does open up opportunities. It does kind of bring you, you feel part of a community in this space. There's a couple of big conferences in the next couple of weeks. Virtually everybody in my network is going, not because we think the content's going to be amazing, but because it's kind of where we all get together. And you see people you used to work with from kind of years ago all coming together, and then straight away you're kind of bouncing off each other and kind of refreshing those connections. So kind of making sure that you keep your network alive is absolutely crucial. But there is a great opportunity. You learn to network, I think, as a sustainability or you learn to network well in the sustainability and ESG space. And I still lean on my network. If I've got a problem and I don't have that right skill set in my team, I do have a very broad network of people I keep in touch with, and hopefully they keep in touch with me and I'm just not chasing them everywhere. But when I have a problem, I can speak to them. I go for coffee and chat things through, and that just adds to my kind of personal development and professional development as well. So that was bang on about 35 minutes. So I'm going to stop my monologue there and kind of open it up to questions.
Thank you so much. There's so much for us all to take away there as educators, and we can share this recording, I think, absolutely with our students, and perhaps invite their comments back to Shaun with commenting perhaps on LinkedIn, tagging him in. I'm going to go through a few questions in the chat that I'll read out to you, Shaun, and then if people want to raise their hands to move on. The top question was from Sylvia, with a few of us very much supporting that, in terms of which AI tools do you recommend we ensure we are introducing to our students?
Now that is a very good question. I have to be careful here because, obviously in the law firm, I can't be seen to promote any particular tool over another. So I'm just going to say this with kind of big caution. Where I have had really good experiences with is a firm called Data Meringue. You give them a Google, have a look at their software on their website. Really good for my area. They do a lot of kind of data scraping. They have a great library of ESG and sustainability reports, which they can kind of pull together. They have really good, clear, focused kind of search engine which you can use, all focused in that kind of sustainability and ESG space. It supports us with trend analysis to understand what's happening regarding the importance of topics. They're also really good at kind of developing additional modules around CSRD compliance or supporting double materiality analysis. So that is kind of one tool which we're utilizing quite a lot in our current day job. You do have to pay to probably gain access. Nevertheless, I think you can have a look at their website and get a feel. So So that is absolutely something which we've been using quite extensively.
Did someone catch the title of that to put it into the chat? That would be helpful, for
Yeah,
me at least.
yeah, data
Thank
marine.
you.
Yeah.
And second question, how do you see the anti-ESG sentiment from the US impacting work in the UK?
Yeah, it's gonna influence. I think as always, it's going to be it's a pendulum, and at the moment we're seeing an awful lot of kind of pushback on a lot of the initiatives, and obviously it's starting in that kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion space. What we're seeing and what we've already seen, certainly from the EU perspective, is this pullback or regulations. So some of you might be aware of the latest kind of sustainability omnibus, which the EU are now consulting on. That's had a massive impact on companies who are caught under that about should they progress, should they not, and they're stuck in a little bit of a kind of holding pattern until I think that gets clarified. You're also seeing that from kind of UK companies as well, who are still trying to understand: do we wait? Do we go? So what we're seeing is a lot of uncertainty, certainly in that kind of corporate disclosure space. And I think that influence is going to continue over the next 4 years or so. I think you are going to see, rollback. Certainly, I think of some of the kind of climate regulation and legislation, certainly in the US, and we're seeing a lot of challenge on certainly what the US feels is overreach by certain jurisdictions around due diligence. So as I've said to my team, we're going to have to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. We're going to get a lot of questions. We're not going to know those answers. And it's just about being open and frank with our clients and with our network that everything's on the table at the moment, and how this evolves is going to leave everyone uncertain. What I have seen, and what we saw 8 years ago when in Trump's first first stint, was essentially, even though they rolled back, they pulled out of like the Paris Agreement. What you then saw is actually the corporate space certainly start stepping into that. Now, I think the dynamic is slightly different here. Certainly with the threat of legal action on certain issues. But what I wouldn't be surprised to see is some firms starting to differentiate themselves from the government and actually stepping up some of their kind of sustainability and ESG initiatives. I certainly hope so, but essentially it's going to be a wild ride, I think.
I'm sure plenty to pick up on there for others in the discussion. There's a couple more questions that come in. John Arthurs had sent one that came to me as direct message. John, I don't know if you want to unmute and ask this yourself. John is a sustainability director at Metrics Lab.
Oh, sure, Karen. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Shaun. It's been really interesting. So yeah, one of the things that we're challenged with at the moment, Shaun, is that, measuring the impact on when we do our CO2 measurement assessment, is measuring the impact of AI and what that's going to do. We're doing work in using AI for our tools. And I'm struggling to find out what the best way really is to quantify that and measure that at the moment. Particularly as we're starting to have to include that measurement into our next fiscal. So I just wondered if you had any advice, any guidance, would be really helpful.
Yeah. Well, John, you can pay for that. No, I said in jest, and absolutely, there's an awful lot of kind of methodologies out there. Which people are leaning on, certainly in that kind of space. What I will do is follow up separately on what those are, and I can get your contact details through the session, or I can reach out to you directly just to kind of talk you through what we're seeing in the market. I would say that there there is starting to be some consolidation around some of the calculation methodologies around this. So I think slowly but surely it's moving forward, and there's certainly a lot of discussion in what we're seeing in the AI space of how best to do this and how to present it, and essentially how to make it fair for everybody, so everyone's got comparable data. So yeah, let me follow up separately on that. Again, just very cautious of doing it on a public forum.
Yes, indeed. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Shaun.
At this point, I'm going to stop the recording to make it a bit more relaxed for
Oh,
anybody.
thank you.